Hey guys, this is going to be like a very long episode, so bear with me. It's going to be one that you just don't want to miss because I don't think I've ever spoken about this before. I was very grateful to be invited on the Oz Property Investment Facebook group. We did a live with Jeff and Joe, great blokes that a lot of you might already know. If you don't, go check them out on the Oz Property Investors Facebook group. We talked about why it may not be actually a good idea to invest in property, full stop. Or right now, we talk about property booms and busts. We talk about how rent vesting doesn't always work. We talk about how maybe you shouldn't buy commercial right now, how paying off your mortgage through investing in properties could be one of those spooky myths about how you can't really retire off property in 10 years very easily, why house and land packages suck, how you should avoid one-stop shop property firms. There's so many reasons why you just should not buy property right now. I know it seems a bit quizzical and weird for me to be talking about this, but it's a long episode. But the number of hidden jewels and gems and diamonds that you'll find in this, hopefully are just unparalleled, not just from me, but from Jeff and Joe as well. So really enjoy this one and let me know what you think. Here you go. Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce the man, the enigmatic and the charismatic PK Gupta. So you were an investment banker. I think was it Goldman you're working for? Goldman Sachs?
No, I don't have the pleasure of working for Goldman. It was JP Morgan.
Oh, JP, all the same, mate. All bankers
yeah,
and all.
They are pretty much.
Yeah, I won't share my thoughts on bankers. But you're passionate about investing in real estate and sort of. I'm going to cut some of because you've got a lot of information about who you are and people should check that out. But you wanted to collate 50 plus factors and run analysis to understand what truly drives capital growth and cash flow. So this is the kind of stuff that has helped you to create 120K. I think it's probably more than 120K now, but that's what it says. So it's correct as of me reading your site. Passive income and helped hundreds, probably even thousands of people now accelerate their journey over the last 5 years. So you got a team of 6. But the thing that I'm most interested in is you're a dad and you're passionate about travel. So where's your favorite place to travel, PK?
We actually just came back from a trip to India, and everyone thinks, oh, look, you were born in India, so you must be like, we're visiting family or something. But like, I love rural India. Like, I feel that metropolitan India is like, it's kind of sold its soul, if you know what I mean. But like regional, rural India, it's like how it used to be, I don't know, like 300, 400 years ago. Like we went to this village, we were hungry. So we knocked on the door and this like beautiful lady, like wife, mother brought us in and they're like really poor, but she cooked this amazing meal for us that would have costed her like a week's wage. And like, it's just like, you do that in, I don't know, Australia, but you do it in America, it's like someone's got a shotgun to your head, right? So it's like, I love like the purity of the hearts of the people in rural India.
Yeah, there you go.
Love that.
Humble kind of trip there. So that's one of my favorite, most recent trips. So good on you. I love a bit of travel myself. We'll get out there eventually again. But tonight we're going to be talking about this. I think we've got 7 things lined up that we're going to be chatting about as to the reasons why you shouldn't buy real estate right now. So it's going to be, and the format of this, so you've spoken to over hundreds or even thousands of people. So you do a weekly, I think at least a weekly podcast, or I think it's weekly. And there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos. Like, you're very prolific. So you think and do a lot of research into these things. So I think you're able to present discussion and argument. So we're going to talk about the thing, what it is, why it is that you should consider not buying because of this reason, and also saying, well, maybe there is. I'm going to throw a little tweak in there just because we can. Is there ever a situation where we might consider one of these things, or one of these things is true? and then we'll sort of wrap up that thing. So did I hit the nail on the head there, Joe? What's the quickest spiel?
Mate, absolutely. We're talking about why you shouldn't be buying property. There are 7 big reasons why you shouldn't be buying property and different types of assets. So let's dive in to statement number 1. So statement number 1 is all about a thing that we've all heard about. And I think that when you start your investing journey, this is where you get led to, because there are massive organizations that make hundreds and hundreds, millions of dollars. And actually the government steers people at times to these type of assets where it's buying a house and land package as a good investment. So that is what we're trying to unpack with PK. So PK, what are your thoughts on this as a reason not to buy property?
Yeah, it's a great one. And just to kind of backtrack for a second as well, like when I first was starting to look into property, like I wish there were forums like your guys, like Oz Property Investors, because, it's almost like you're on this side of the fence, and the other side of the fence, the grass is greener and everyone's rich in property apparently. And all these investment companies are telling you if you do what they do, you'll also become rich. But there was very little education at that time. So like I come from this theme of like, there's this saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right. So people who told me about who to watch out for, what to watch out for, they became my friends. Right. Because they were against the people who were trying to rip me off. So that's exactly what you guys are doing. And I'm sure everyone's super grateful for the community that you've built. And without getting all fluffy and stuff, like you guys are like genuinely doing a terrific job over the last 2 years. So
I mean, I must admit, I do see the occasional, because I vet a lot of, well, not a lot, but I vet a good majority of the comments and just sort of see where they're coming from and who the people works for. If somebody's saying, "Oh, the house and land packages are great," unless they're like, I usually sort of my sort of detector is on a little bit just to kind of say, well, okay, is this person work for that company? If they do, that's okay. I'm not saying that then, but I just sort of say, well, okay, well, these are the things that people should consider. And if they still decide to go down that path, that's of course up to them. But unpack some of Joe's mentioned it, but crystallize some of the reasons why you feel it may not be a reason to buy one of these right now, or just ever maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And like some of this might sound very basic, but I think a lot of people should know, if they don't, that land appreciates and buildings depreciate. And so when you're buying a house and land package, especially these days, like, maybe 5-10 years ago, it was different. But these days, if you're out in Western Sydney or out in Western Melbourne, you're buying like 300, maybe 350 square meters, and you're paying, I don't know, like in Western Melbourne, probably $700,000-800,000 in some areas for that. In Sydney, you're paying $1 million for that. And then you're building like this overcapitalized, in many instances, house on top. So like I know a lot of like people that sort of I help in my free Facebook group and stuff like that. They're like, well, PK, all of this sounds good. Buildings depreciate, land appreciates. Don't buy in whoop whoop and like far out places in Sydney, because there's so much developable land supply, and so therefore property prices don't grow because there's so much supply that outstrips demands. These are all the reasons, by the way, you shouldn't buy a house and land package. That it's brand new and all, and generally brand. What I'm getting at here is that people don't believe me, because they're like, well, okay, I know that Jeff, Joe, and PK say try to avoid house and land packages for XYZ reason, but the reality is that Western Melbourne has like gone up 50%. All these new places. The reality is that like Western Sydney, the things that I would never buy have gone up, like Box Hill, Rouse Hill, all these like new communities.
I think you just have to remember that Sydney is king. Sydney is king, PK. Don't you mentioned Sydney, but I think having grown up in Sydney, I don't know so much about Melbourne, but yeah, it's interesting because there's just this perception that people can't really buy elsewhere. But go on, sorry.
Yeah,
but it's all relative though. Like it's all relative. Like yes. If you bought in the last 2 years, if you bought in 2020, you bought anywhere. If you bought a house and land package in 2020, everything has gone up. The government printed billions of dollars and inserted that, and pretty much allowed property to expand up crazy. So it is everywhere. Like it's just prices have inflated. It doesn't necessarily mean that this house and land package is a good investment. because it's grown. If you invested that money in another market, you would have had a better opportunity. Like if
Exactly. And like sometimes I try to prove that point because, I'm kind of against house and land packages. I try to prove that point by saying, all right, let's pick a random Western Sydney suburb that everyone is like, a lot of people get flogged, like Schofields. Okay. And like, you bought a house and land package there 2-3 years ago, you've made 50%, maybe even like 60%. But if you bought an established house there, you've made like 70-80% in many cases. I'm just using round numbers here.
It's because you can sell to the developer who's then cutting it up, and then they're making the money on the
And it kind of like it kind of infuriates me still to this day. Like it kind of still makes my blood boil when you see those ads on Facebook. It's like depreciation, get your tax down because you're buying this house and land package. It's like
no
it just
maintenance.
Low maintenance, easy to get tenants. It's like, seriously, like, yes, you're going to have low maintenance, but even a well-bought established property is only going to cost you like $1,500, $2,000 on average over the long term per year. And depreciation, you got to pay half of that back based on your marginal tax rate if and when you sell. Like all of these things can be demystified, and I genuinely get kind of worked up because people don't realize that, and then like a few years later they're like, property investing doesn't work. So that's one reason why you should not buy property right now, if that's what you think.
I think the other the other big thing that we didn't really touch, Joe touched on a little bit about the millions of dollars that some companies are earning. When I was sort of in 2013, 2014, 2015, we probably all had conversations with similar kind of people. I would sort of say I would have like there'd be those, you'd get attracted to these seminars or whatever, all these companies, and you'd ask. I just sort of, I don't know how I even know to ask this question, but I suppose you traditionally your BA you pay fee for service, or you pay whatever, you pay a fee, and then the companies, it's a free kind of, you don't pay for their service. And I said, well, okay, how do you? My question to them was, how do you get paid? And they said, oh, actually, I asked, I think it was one person, and they told me, they said, we get paid by the person who provides this land. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Well, I said, well, how do I know? I kind of thought, well, how do I know that that's the best investment? Because you're basically selling me something, a product that you already have. So you don't even know what so you've only got one product. If you have a hammer, then everything's a nail, I suppose, is my point.
Yeah. And the biggest thing for me is I was having a conversation with my auntie a couple of years back, and I was like, oh, so what are you doing nowadays? She's like, oh, I'm a real estate agent and I sell to developers. I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like, how does that work? And she's like, no, I sell for developers. I was like, oh, so you sell these properties to people? Well, I kind of get these people. I kind of buy for them. I mean, so how does it work? She's like, I'll find a developer will reach out to me and say, hey, sell this piece of property, and I will give you 6% of the purchase price. On $500,000 purchase, 6% is $30,000. And she would get this whacking commission on top of it because she sold it to some first home buyer and there's a question that's come up here. By Brian, which is a great question. So who should buy house and land packages? We are meant to build 1 million houses in the next 5 years. The people that should buy a house and land package are the people that want to love to live in a house and land location. So if you go to Schofields and you're like, wow, I love the open scenery. I love that there's a Costco just around the corner. Then absolutely, you should go out and do that. But as an investor, our goal is to make the most amount of money in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of risk and not get in trouble with these type of
for the buyer brief, isn't it, Joe? Isn't that the
to match the buyer brief? Yes, it is. But you don't want to be buying these type of assets because they're not in high growth. They're not necessarily in high growth locations. And there are some house and land packages that are in infill locations. So that's something to look out for as well. But for me, when I look at investing, I'm not trying to gobble up all the information and put everything on my plate. I've got like a reductionist type of investment strategy where house and land packages, I know 98% of them are rubbish and that 2% of are going to be really, really good investments. So what I'm just going to do is remove 100% of them off my plate, then remove off the plan apartments, and then remove properties that are out of my price range, then remove properties out of my yield range, then remove properties out of the states that I don't want to buy in. And all of a sudden, you've got such a narrow scope for your investment to focus on, and you can dive into those markets a little bit more to get those investment
Especially if you're
returns.
new, right, Joe? Like if you're new and this is your first or second property, like that is the exact right approach you should take. If you already got 10 under your belt, then maybe you can try extract value from the 2%. But like whenever you hear growth corridors, that doesn't mean that that corridor is going to grow in value. It means there's more population coming into that growth corridor. How does population get there? It's like because there's more houses. Who projects or who predicts and makes these forecasts for population? It's like it's the local council based on how many building approvals, how many developers are approaching them to build house and land packages. So it's almost like supply is dictating the demand forecast. If that's happening, then supply and demand are always going to be balanced.
Somebody said watching from Western Sydney. I just couldn't. Whereabouts in? I mean, maybe you shouldn't ask Pete. Pete, where you're from in Western Sydney, because that might be too close. I'm from the western suburbs as well. Working class boy, Miles, good old St Mary's originally from. But I want to throw this in there because this is kind of an area, and I think it's important that we kind of address some of these. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. Is Oran Park still a good suburb to buy, expecting the prices to go up with airport, train station, public still coming in? We'll throw to you first, PK. This is Duration from YouTube. So I've got a view on this, but what are your thoughts, PK?
I'd love to hear your view. 'Cause I don't know off the top of my head, like what the data is for Oran Park, but I can comment on the airport. Airport generally, and train stations and public schools. Like just because there's a public school there or a new one coming in, that has no sort of direct correlation with capital growth. Same with train station. I mentioned this like a few years ago, like around Bella Vista. There was like that new train line in Sydney, and back then
it's
I
the
think
Norwest kind of.
Yeah,
it's the Norwest.
2018. When did that get put in? 2000.
Yeah, about 2018. Yeah.
2018.
It's kind of linking the North Shore to the north. Yeah, went up to Chatswood, and then you went out to. I think that's where it was.
Exactly. So everyone, like a lot of people, bought in Bella Vista around that time or thereabouts. Thinking new train station. Like, of course, property prices are going to go up, and like literally, they just were flat until, of course, the post-COVID boom. So you'd think like, okay, new train station in a place that is so far away from the CBD, like surely that's a good thing. Like surely that's going to positively impact people's desire to move to Bella Vista, thereby improving demand. But it didn't have any impact whatsoever. And of course, there's reasons for that, i.e. it still took the same amount of time to get into the city. It was just a different route, etc. Yeah. And same with the airport. Like I used to be the head of strategy at Brisbane Airport Corporation. And like our view of, I don't know if they've changed their view, but my view at least was that the new airport is not really going to be like a full-fledged, like booming airport in 2026. In fact, post-COVID, I don't even think it's going to open in 2026 anymore. It may ramp up very slowly. So you've kind of got this like languishing airport, a bit like Gold Coast maybe 5-10 years ago. Gold Coast had an airport, but it was like, it's kind of dead, right? So look, yes, property prices around the airport have gone up. The zoning has changed, and that is the reason why they've gone up, not so much because of like a big population drive. That doesn't mean Oran Park is bad, but I'm just trying to demystify some of the underlying factors.
Yeah, that's and in terms of my view is interesting, Josie. We have to get on to number 2 because we've got 7 of these. We've got a Q&A. There's so many questions popping in. So my quick TL 30-second view is, I think if you're buying an investment property in that area for that reason, and I haven't looked at the data, this is purely, I used to sort of drive out that way, or I used to live and sort of play cricket out that way. I think you're buying after a lot of people have already bought. So for that to be a viable investment, you have to assume that people have to keep coming into the area and paying more for that property. So I think the median house price out there is probably hovering around the million, maybe a little bit more. And so it's all very kind of not Legoland, but it's all the same sort of stock. So if they build 10,000 more properties in the area, and they're going to sell them for 1.2, 1.3, whatever they're selling for. Why is somebody then going to pay 1.1 or 1.2 for your existing property when that's sort of 5 years old? So I think a lot of that is already priced in. And yes, you may go okay, but why? And the yield on it, what is the yield going to be? It might be like 3.5%, 4%.
Someone just posted here, Oran Park yield is 2.84. So it's costing probably like 15, 20 grand.
I don't know. Just like what? So if you're not seeing capital growth, then what are you? So you're speculating, not speculating. Well, you are speculating somewhat that you will see capital growth. Because if you don't see that, then interest rates now at 5%. So
well, this is the interesting thing about these type of assets that are sold, these house and land packages. They're sold with negative gearing in mind. So I thought we just mentioned a couple of the buzzwords. Negative gearing, right? What's the other one? Depreciation. There's a lot of depreciation. There's rental guarantees. It's those things are not necessarily a good thing. Like, do you want to lose $100 to make 30 cents back? Like lose a dollar to make 30 cents back. It doesn't really make much sense if the growth isn't going to be there on that side of the thing. Anything else we should unpack on house and land packages, you guys think?
Oh, we could probably rip into it for a long time.
I think we've been relatively balanced. Somewhat balanced, but no, people loving this because I think it's great that we're able to talk to these things. So shall we go on to number 2, which is
number 2,
retiring, being financially free in 10 years. So the way I'm going to frame this particular one, because a lot of people sort of talk about this, is if you think that an average sort of salary just ticking along, being going to be financially free in 10 years, I think that's a wrong reason to be investing in this type of asset. I think the average sort of person do it in 10 years is probably not going to do it. It's going to be very hard for them. So what are your thoughts on that, PK?
Yeah, like people, because they don't like their 9 to 5, they like they're feeling pain in their current lifestyle environment and atmosphere. They sort of look for a escape. They look for a panacea. And then when they start seeing lots of Facebook ads and like testimonials of people achieving what they want to achieve, that their confirmation bias starts kicking, and they're like, yeah, well, I didn't believe it the first Facebook ad, I didn't believe it the first YouTube ad, but now I'm like bombarded, like maybe it is possible, and this guy is saying it's possible, and this guy is on a golf course while recording the 30-second what do you call it?
We've all seen that.
The guy or the girl. Because women play golf and they play it very well too. They also,
you know what I mean? So it's like their brain kind of tells them like yes, and then they'll have a conversation with their husband or wife or whatever, and like they get lured into this kind of dark alleyway, and then they get effectively mugged. Like that is effectively what's happening, right? They're getting mugged.
Sounds horrible, PK. Like I mean,
I tell you what's worse is getting mugged is only a one-time thing, and it hurts a little bit. You lose what's in your wallet. But when you get taken advantage of by these kind of spruikers that have these crazy 10-year retirement plans, you're getting mugged of your life savings. So I'd much rather be mugged in the short term and get hit like that than what actually happens when you go through these.
Neither. My option there is option C. I don't want either of those. Yeah.
I'm even seeing posts about people that are saying retire with property in 3 years. Guys, when you buy a property, nothing changes in your life. When you buy a second property, nothing changes in your life. When you have a third, 3 years in, 5 years in, nothing changes. It pretty much stays the same, except you've got a little bit of admin on the back end that you have to work with, but it takes a long time to build up substantial wealth within property. There's no quick win and easy fixes. And anyone that says you can retire in 10 years, it really depends. You can retire if you have $2 million and you leverage up to 80%, you can probably retire in 10 years. I think you could do some smart decisions, get involved with some developments, do some joint ventures, and you could build up that wealth base to then capitalize and then get out in 10 years.
So basically what Joe's saying is you have to, if you want to get financially free in 10 years of property, you have to work. You can't just buy property and expect to be financially free in 10 years.
Because retirement means cash flow, right? It doesn't mean like 5 million in the bank. It means cash flow, yearly 100K or 150K. And I don't think what people realize, obviously you guys know, right, that property is a pretty terrible yielding asset. Like it yields pretty terrible.
As a
Net,
net, yeah.
6% gross yield is considered to be good. Net, that's like not much at all, especially with current interest rates. And so what's the only attractive thing about property? Sorry, not the only, but one of the most attractive thing about property is the ability to leverage. The more you leverage, the more good debt you take, the more properties you own. In 20 years, 15 years, whatever, you can sell some and be debt free. Then that's when the cash flow boost. It's like a hockey stick because there's no debt on it. But to be able to get that many properties, you need income, right? You need to be able to service the borrowing capacity. So I think like it's very easy to say like 10 properties in 10 years. Like, yeah, but that's great. But most people can't get past 2 or 3 properties in the first 2 or 3 years. Like it takes them another 3 years to be able to work their LVR down, get their cash flow up. If they get promoted in their career, then they can get their 4th one. So it takes like, I don't know, what's your experience, Joe? Like, I probably think it takes 10 years to even, pass through the acquisition phase of a person.
I would say so. So I'll share my screen right now, and I don't know how well this is going to go because I don't know how visually. No, we're not going to role play, but this is a platform that I use to go through strategy sessions with people around building out properties. So just a high level quick set. So this is an average person on an average salary, and we are purchasing 5 property. These addresses are fake, so ignore them. We are purchasing 5 properties over 5 years. And over here is the equity position. So the value of the property. So you can see here, as we are buying throughout the years, the equity and value increases. But you can see here is the cash flow. So you can see -10, -12, -15. That yellow is the target, and the green is what we're looking to get to. But it takes 5 acquisitions at 5% growth and 5% yield. So on average, property has grown about 6.9% year on year. But if we win at the lowest level, we'll win in a better environment.
For those watching the podcast, I'm sorry about you can imagine a whole bunch of really sexy graphs on a screen.
Yeah, very sexy graphs, very sexy charts. But you can see in 10 years, this is starting pretty much from having two properties already and ending up with 5. That in 10 years' time, we'll have $4 million portfolio. But we'll still be negative. We'll have $20,000 in cash flow. It's going to take us until 2024 to hit our goal. But this is where the value of property grows. So at 2042, we're going to have a $6 million portfolio, and in 30 years' time, we'll have a $10 million portfolio.
What are the assumptions on that growth? Is that a 5% growth or what?
5% growth rate, 5% yield. Rent increases at 5%, 92% occupancy rate, interest rates at 5%. So that's average throughout the entire time. Inflation at 2.5. You can increase and decrease as you go along. But there's a couple of basic assumptions. But here is one of the most important charts because I've kind of forced this. This is the borrowing capacity. So a person on this type of salary would actually not be able to purchase this many properties because their borrowing capacity and their debt to income ratio would be overextended. So you would actually have to spread this out between the next 10 years, like PK was saying, to acquire them so your debt to income ratio doesn't go over.
I love these charts because they're so quantifiable. Like, it's like I feel that in property, we talk a lot, but unless there's like a chart, unless there's like data points that people can run sensitivities on, it's hard for them to really know what's possible. Like one of the questions I always get is like, what's possible for me? And if you don't know what's possible, then you just fall back on, wouldn't it be nice to get 3 properties in 3 years? Or wouldn't it be nice to make 100K in 10 years?
I want 10 properties in 10 years. That's what I want. And it's something good to aim for, but it has to have some meaning behind it. Like, there has to be, what do you actually want? Like, I want to retire on a beach. No, you don't. You want some time with the kids. You want time to do whatever you want. But seeing it laid out and at a minimum base at 5% growth and 5% yield, it is possible, but it does take time. So absolutely, if you think you're going to retire in 10 years, maybe property investment is not for you, and you should not be buying property in this day and age.
Yeah,
We get this
and
question
I
a
think
lot.
the other thing that we sort of touched on slightly is at the 10-year mark, and I think you alluded to a PK, is you've still got maybe, I don't know, 45, 50% LVR on it as well. I don't know because the principal is sort of, you're not paying off as much of the principal up. I mean, depending on how much you got in the offset, but you start to really hammer off the principal. Look, some people go interest only, and if they are, then that's up to them. But assuming you're paying P&I, you're actually reducing that debt, then you're not really going to see, as Joe illustrated in his graphs. So it's probably about 15 years, isn't it, Joe? Maybe 15, 18 years to start to see a bigger growth in that if you bring those charts back up. Or when does it start to really kick off?
It really starts to kick off. So this is the chart that we're most interested in here. So this is let's just go into equity.
Passive income,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, you want passive income?
Yeah, I don't know. Equity, mate. I can't live off. I can't really live off equity.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I mean, I can.
So this is it here. So it really starts to kick off. Like you're making 168,000. You're doing pretty good. But this is inflation adjusted money. Okay. So these numbers, everyone's like, oh, it's not inflation. Yeah, it is inflation.
And that's buying 5 properties in 5 years, though, is it? And that's gross income, right? So that's not after.
No, this is after all expenses.
Is it?
This is net income. Yeah.
Net income.
Yeah, this is because we're paying down debt. We're putting savings into our offset. We are putting savings into our offset here. It's growing, and it's paying us an income.
It's very similar to my math. Like, those of you who are my clients and are watching, you'll know that, it takes at least 13 years, right, to get a 6-figure passive income for the average person. So it's kind of corroborates with what you're saying.
So, unfortunately, we're crushing some great dreams here, but and I think the people who
don't invest, right? Like if you want to
don't invest.
To answer the question, because everyone's like, oh, what's the topic of the live stream? Well, that's the answer. Don't invest if you want that outcome in like 5 years or 2 years or 8 years. It's going to take time.
Yeah, and unless you can go all Charlie Vaylor and smash out the income sort of side of things, and which is kind of it's not cheating, but yeah, it's sort of.
But it's not because if you're already 10 years invested in property, absolutely you can retire in 10 years. It's what is that equity that you're starting with? What is that capital that you're starting with? Because if you do have $1 million, you're going to do far better capital, like compounding year on year. So if you are 45 years old, you've been working in a corporate job, you've got $180,000, you own your own home, you've paid that sucker off, and you're like, how am I actually going to retire? Because I've got this massive property here, but it's not, maybe you can leverage into property and go into it, but that's not financial advice.
Can I also say something a bit controversial? You brought up the Charlie example. Like if you're starting with 2 mil in the bank or 3 mil in the bank, I would argue, and you're looking to retire, like you're looking to transform that capital into cash flow, I would argue don't put it in property. You can put it in. None of this is financial advice, right? You can get much higher yielding, safe asset classes to put that in. So I would argue if I put on my Charlie hat, like I would have done things differently if you don't care about the growth. He might have cared about the growth. I don't know.
But in all fairness, if you have $2 million at 6% return, that's $120,000.
Yeah.
Paying you just every single year. So
but is it right? Is it? Sorry, I know this is not meant to be a fight, but not like last time, Joe. Anyway,
turn into a fight.
But it's not like just once again, just to kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like it's not yielding 6%, right? Like we're not talking commercial here. We're talking residential. 6% yielding assets are probably 3% net after you take away, or 3.5% net after PM. Keep in mind you have to do some renovation every now and then for a property over the long term. You got like council fees, insurance seems to be going up. So like my exact like net calculation may be wrong, but I would say even commercial these days, like net is not 6% for a good quality asset. What to speak of resi.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, let's kick on to number 3. Let's do it because I'm trying to keep us on task. You should always buy property. Buy. Should we? What if somebody has this mindset? Should they be buying property right now?
Should you always buy property? Buy. I think you should. Oh man, this is like you're killing my business here. But like the honest answer is like, if you only are looking at a certain budget, and if you're only looking at a particular city or state, then there are times where you should just like point blank not buy property, because the data is not always good for a lot of places. Like every Tuesday I do mentoring calls, and I think last Tuesday I was telling my members that honestly, guys, I don't see any decent locations under 400K in Victoria, full stop. Right? Like full stop. So if your brief is always, I want to buy a property, I want to buy in Victoria, my budget's 400K, buy. It's always a good time to buy. Like my humble opinion based on data is that no, like for that brief, like just wait, maybe wait 8 months, 10 months, don't buy. But
is the reason for that because the locations where it's under 400, there's just not enough sort of there's not enough reason for those areas to have long-term fundamentals. Is that sort of why?
And the long-term, like basically every place in Australia does very similar over the long term, like 20, 30 years. The reason I say that about Victoria and specifically in that price bracket, it's nothing to do with that price bracket per se, like cheap properties perform badly or anything like that. Actually, it's the opposite. It's that the short-term data doesn't point to any, fantastic growth in the short term. In fact, it points the other way. So, like there's that common saying of people who invest in crypto, buy the dip. It's not quite like that in property. But if something's going down, I know in the long term it's going to go up. But like, why are there all these property spruikers saying buy, because on the long term always goes up when in the short term it'll go down? So why not wait? Like, what's the harm in waiting? Now, the other side of the thing is like, well, there's always a good place to buy in Australia. I completely agree with that. So it's not, should you buy now? You should always buy, but particularly only in areas that are perhaps really far away from you, because it might be there that the short-term data is good. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, for example, if my budget is 400K, or I'm not buying anywhere in the Illawarra or pretty much anywhere. Like you're going to need a budget of at least 600, 700, 800, 900K. And then you're sort of compromising on a yield potentially. So yeah, go on, Joe.
Yeah, but this is the hardest thing, right? You're an investor, and I want to buy in my backyard because that's where I'm comfortable. But this is like a mental mindset shift that people have to kind of get over, the hump of I'm not going to buy in my backyard because I don't think it's the best location to buy in. But the problem with that is it opens up all of Australia. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, I know that I'm not going to buy in Cronulla, where I live, because of this reason. Because one, I can't afford a house, I can't afford this. Okay, great. So what am I going to do? I'm going to buy interstate, but it's very challenging because, like, how do you even get started into that? How do you even go to buy?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the people who, and you can't fault them because I was the same, right? Like, is it a good time to invest in the stock market? Well, the ASX 300 has 300 stocks. There's always ones that are going to go up. In COVID, there was ones that got trashed and ones that you would have become a millionaire on. So property is the same, right? Each suburb is a stock. And like you said, Joe, it's like, oh man, I'm living in Sydney and Melbourne. Like PK is saying, or Joe's saying, or this person's saying that Perth is the best, place to buy right now. Like, I just can't stomach buying half.
I was listening to Tim Lawless the other day, and he was talking about like the middle decade of the last 30 years in Perth absolutely skyrocketed. So and then just absolutely did nothing and went backwards in some parts.
And this question this question that's just come up, I thought was really, really worthwhile to bring up, because it says, but sometimes if you wait for a while, your serviceability may be affected due to various reasons: kids, your dependents, interest rates rising, you lose your job. And this is where the question comes up of, hey, should I buy or should I wait? What should I do? What is your answer to that, PK, if someone comes to you with that kind of question?
Well, I think you should, like we said before, it's always a good time to buy. Like I'm buying right now myself, as long as you know where and how, like to the point of, interstate and everything like that.
No boots on the ground, eh?
let's not get into boots on the ground, but like if your wife is going to go on maternity leave, and you're
or your
like,
husband, because
or your
sometimes these days
non-binary, we're non-binary here, like anyone, right?
the female can be the main breadwinner as well. I'm
Everyone
okay with
goes
that.
on leave.
Just make sure you're buying something with high cash flow, and make sure that if you're going interest only, your interest only period is not coming up for expiry in that time when your serviceability is shot, right? So
Yeah.
like I get that question, absolutely, but there's ways to mitigate it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you go, Joe.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, well,
I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and I sort of said, we were talking about a particular purchase that a person had made, and we sort of said, yes, whilst we may not have bought in that particular location, it was sort of North Queensland somewhere. However, if this person isn't necessarily going to increase their income, then maybe at the time, if they're not expecting to double their income, then how are they, like, if they wait for 3 years or whatever it is to buy in blue chip or an area where it's sort of considered more desirable, then by that stage, that property in that area, we may have already seen interest rates sort of level off and dip a little bit. And so people may have already started to buy in the area that is more desirable, and then they're missing out because they haven't. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's if you're ready to buy now, I would say, and you've got the money, you've got the finance, you're ready to go, I would say just go ahead and pull the trigger on a good location. Do the research, get educated first, and then go out there and make it happen. Because if people are trying to time the market and wait, the market's it's not just an up and down thing. It is an up and down thing for 15,000 suburbs where some are going up and some are going down, and you need to choose the locations that are going up. But your situation can change at whatever time. You can get fired, you can lose your job, you accidentally. I had a friend, he said, guess what, we're pregnant. And I was like, wow, that's a surprise. He's like, yeah, it's terrible. Like, this is the worst. It's ruined a lot of things for us. I was like, oh, okay, sorry, not congratulations. What do I say in that situation? But you never know what comes up. And he's like, I need to buy property now because I only have a 9-month window before I have another dependent and I'm unable to buy property again. So anytime, just jump in, but make sure, you cross the T's.
And what else are you going to do with the money anyway, right? Like, you're going to put it in a term deposit, or you're going to put it in the stock market or crypto, or leave it in the bank. Like, you're not going to get well off by not investing.
Well, yeah, inflation's at 6.9%, dropped from 7 point, what was it, 7 point whatever. So that's good. Inflation is going down. 7.3, it's got down. But if you put 3% in the bank, you get 3% from the bank. Inflation is running at 7%. You're still losing money. So if you have $100,000 in the bank, in a year's time, it's going to be worth $700 left? It's not.
Joe shouldn't do. Anyway, it's worrisome.
Don't do public math. We don't do public math here.
and go and speak to your financial advisor and all that sort of stuff. Not that people with licenses and stuff. Let's do it. Number 4. I'm gonna hurry us up a little bit here. Buying commercial will mean you rake in the cash. I was thinking on the fly here with that term. But what are your thoughts on that, PK?
Yeah, like this is a good one. It's sort of close to my heart because I'm actually in the market for one right now. But I did a video on it as well. Like, these days, I think because there's more education and content on commercial, everyone sort of thinks commercial is better than resi, better cash flow, you get the capital growth, etc., etc. Like, the reality is that commercial property markets are, in terms of growth, are basically dictated by the spread between the official cash rate and the cap rate. Right, so the cap rate is like the yield on the commercial asset, like just like residential yield. So like let's say interest rates go up by 2%, which they have, right? They're going to, or in the past. Then commercial property must come down. Like I don't care if it's like in this prime spot. I don't care if it's in medical. I don't care if a dentist has just put $1 million fit out in it. Commercial property must come down, like, because that is the way that it is valued. I don't care like if I don't value it that way, or a buyer's agent doesn't value it that way, or someone else. That's how it's valued, right? So right now, to the point of should we buy property right now or not, I don't think for most, I'll go as far as to say most price ranges and most types of commercial assets, this is not the right time to buy. Okay, let me kind of qualify that as well. is
Can we,
because
I got a question here. What value commercial are we talking about? Because that's an interesting one, isn't it? What do we?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what you're going to differentiate on now, PK.
Sorry,
So
go
where
on.
are you going?
Yeah, no, I'll try to get to that. Good question as well. So like, there's this kind of theory that rents are rising. Massively low vacancy rates, especially in industrial, like let's say in Brisbane or Perth, and this and that. And so therefore, rents are rising. Therefore, commercial property prices will hold up. Cap rates or yields will, have a floor under them. That's not how it works, because like rents are like a minuscule portion compared to the interest repayments on the debt. The debt, let's say $1 million, or let's say $2 million or $3 million. The debt is huge, like let's say 65%, right? Normal LVR for commercial. The rent going up, I guess 5, 6, 7% rent rise, even though in percentage terms it seems really higher than the interest rate rises, in absolute terms it's very small. So the erosion of value in the commercial property is huge because interest rates are killing it compared to how much rents are rising. Just mathematically, like, I won't do YouTube math or live math, Facebook math, but like this is just a reality. And in terms of like which price ranges, I honestly think that under $1 million, under $1.5 million is there's always markets and markets, always exceptions, right? 2%. But there's such a high risk place or time to be buying commercial property. And the reason is because unemployment, the effect of interest rate rises on the real economy is delayed by, actually, if you look at the statistics, unemployment is 1 year lagging, right? 1 year lagging.
Why is there such a lag though? What do people make? Because businesses try and tough it out, or what? Why is
Yeah, like no one likes to lay off people, right? So initially they're living off the fumes of the previous boom. This is businesses, revenue's still good. And maybe 6 months later, revenue starts to dry up. So they stop having office Christmas parties or free drinks on Fridays or what have you. The last thing they do is lay off people because it's not fun, right? And so there's this lagging effect. Under $1.5 million commercial property is small business owners. These are not national tenants like a KFC. These are not like big, like robust war chest, heavy asset or, working capital type of businesses. They don't have a huge buffer. These are small mom and dad businesses. And they're the ones that when they can't pay rent, they just don't pay rent because they can't. Whereas a business, like I have one of my commercial properties as a national optician, if they are struggling, like they'll still figure it out because they've got like 20 branches all over Australia. Like they can, rob Peter to pay Paul from different locations. So I think the brunt of this higher interest rate cycle is going to be felt by the real economy, especially in unemployment, especially in to small business owners about 6 to 12 months from now. So yes, in that time frame, you bought a commercial property worth $1 million, 700K, you're getting that cash flow. But in the same time, you've got that additional risk of what will happen over the horizon, and the property is dropping in value. That's a reality. That's actually what's happening right now.
And you're kicking out a lot of investors at that higher range as well. You're kicking out a lot of wannabe investors and mum and dad investors that are fighting over the 700, 800, the 900, because you're going on that next tier, which is purely just business to business transactions, because people want this more secure asset. Out of curiosity, PK, what type of what are you looking for in your commercial property? Like, what do you need it to be?
Yeah, like I'll be honest, like I don't profess to be like a guru in commercial or anything like that, but I've like looked at data is not that credible in commercial in terms of longevity and historical data, but I've got my hands on what I can, and that's where these inferences are coming from. But honestly, I'm learning on the fly. Like I'm in the range of kind of 3 million plus. And I was like, my hypothesis was that the people who are buying $3 million plus properties are perhaps a little bit well off. It's a business to business relationship. National tenants can withstand the storm. But what I'm seeing on the ground, like when I say on the ground, calling agents and things, mostly in places like Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, like even these agents, like there was this agent, I was looking at what's that? It's like a plumbing, it's like the competitor to Reese. It's like a plumbing company.
Middies?
Hey?
Middies?
No,
No,
it's another one.
Victorian.
Anyway, it's a big company owned by Fletcher Building in New Zealand. So it's a multinational company. They do like faucets and plumbing supplies. Guys, I'm drawing a blank here.
I only know
Huge,
Reese's.
And it
Light,
doesn't
but,
matter.
yeah. So
Google
it's in
it.
Camp Hill, right?
Trade
Camp
link.
Hill, blue chip suburb in Brisbane. And like I was talking to the agent, right? And the agent's like, "Oh, I think this is a good deal." And it's like a new agent, I could tell because his voice was a bit high pitched, a bit like mine.
Didn't sound
And
very
like,
convincing. This is a good deal.
and he was like, like this is a good deal because
Trade link.
6 months ago this would have gone for 4 mil, and right now it's about 3.5 mil. And I'm like, well, that actually tells me that the value is sliding, that the cap rate has gone from
increasing.
about 5.5, this is Brisbane, to about 6.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you think about this in the future? Like, I was just putting on the spot. He's like, oh, like I'm trying to condition the owners, but I reckon in another 6 months this will go for 3 mil. I'm like, what? Why are you telling me this? Like, you're the sales agent. Don't tell me this. And I'm seeing this again and again and again. This was like a revelation.
I'll call
to
you in
me.
6 months, mate. We'll pay 2.7 in 6 months' time. Let's sign the contract now, and I'll put a due diligence clause that expires 28 days after that 6-month period. And then, we'll negotiate that. I'll pay 2.5.
I think that's the time when there's so many deals potentially to be had. So is it the best time to buy property right now? Even in commercial, I think, you can always snag a bargain. You can always get a fantastic deal. But if you don't know what you're doing, or if you're just going by the rhetoric of the content that you consume, then if I bought that property right now, like I'd pay maybe 3.5 mil for it, get about a 6% cap. Yeah, I'm making like hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash flow. But for an expensive property, 3 mil plus, like a slight shift in cap rate from 6 to 6.5, like that's hundreds of thousands of dollars I can save, right?
Well, and I think you're hitting on, and the reason why investors are doing this and people are doing this is because they want to people are uncertain where interest rates are going. As in, we don't we have some suspicion that yes, it'll slow down. It won't keep going up to the cash rate won't go to 4% or 4.5%. But if it does, then a commercial investor wants to get rewarded for the risk that they're taking on buying into a business. So instead of buying a 6% net yield, which is if interest rates go to 6%, you're basically you're paying. You might still have that, but they want to see an 8% net yield, and for that to happen, the rent's not going to increase fast enough. So you're going to have to then sort of reduce the price, which is yield compression.
Yeah.
We'll live and learn with this. Like there's someone saying here in the Facebook that I'm wrong. And he's saying, sorry, I'm specifically talking about the industrial market with this. He's saying industrial sheds, 5% cap rates are the best investments on earth. Like respectfully, and you may know more than me that I don't know you.
Small
but
industrial
like 3 years ago, you're buying those at 8% cap rate.
7 or 8,
and that was where the market was in equilibrium. So like it's the hottest market right now, industrial. But does that mean that we're at the top of the market? Like Sydney a year ago, like everyone wanted to get into Sydney because everyone was just printing money. But when everyone's doing that, is that the right time to be buying?
Yeah. At what point do the cap rates get to 5.5, 5, 4, 5, and then all of a sudden you're buying commercial to lose money? One of the things I think is worthwhile, I've just posted in the comments. Oh, PK did apparently. The Wealth Code by Grant.
I don't know how that happened.
No, I posted,
that's
but
because
it's you're connected to the stream. But I've just posted this. If you Google this and write free PDF, it's a fantastic book that goes through
Grant Antone, or is it Grant Cardone?
Grant Antone, and he talks all about leverage and the difference between the spread on commercial properties and how that stuff works. Because I think we went really deep into the commercial property world, and I think it's very important that if you are thinking about commercial, get educated and get on top of that. Goes to my point right at the beginning, right? Like my quote: "Only a fool plays a game without knowing the rules and who the players are first." So get educated is,
Does it feel a little
always.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted
Feel a bit uncomfortable?
For PK with buyer's agents and that. What's that PK? I just wanted to. So Brian, I love the contributions that Brian has each and every week. Like your support is phenomenal, Brian. Thank you and yourself and Lisa. He says, does it really matter if the value goes down if you are getting the income hold long term or HODL, depending on which persuasion investment you want to look at? HODL. If you know, you know.
Does it matter?
Does it? Yeah, I think it does, Brian. But I can see your point. I can elaborate. But what do you think, PK?
No, it's a good point, right? And like maybe if you don't really care about being like laser precise with your investments, then it doesn't really matter. Of course, notwithstanding what I said about small business owners gonna maybe struggle in the next year or so. But yeah, like the reason it would matter is if you can get the same asset, just like I was talking about, I could probably get that same 3.5 million asset for 3 million in 6 months' time. And so the cash flow is the same. It's just the yield will be higher. So it's like I've just effectively made myself 2 years of rental income because it was giving around 250K a year.
You've also reduced how much deposit you're not going to reduce the deposit you need by that much, but
well, I mean, at a point like this, his question does ring true. Like we had Steve McKnight on last night, and anyone last week, and whoever doesn't know Steve McKnight, multimillionaire, great, does property, bought 260 properties. He owns commercial property that's spitting off $500,000 cash flow, free cash flow every single year, but he owns them 100% debt free. So at this point, he doesn't care what the value of the property is because he just cares about what rent flow.
He probably doesn't like it going down though, but I'm sure he doesn't like it going down.
Well, it's the same rent. If he's getting the same rent, it doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is we'll get on to the next thing. I'll finish off on this. It only matters really, Brian, if you're everybody if you're a forced seller, because imagine if you lose your job, you don't have that buffer in place, and then sure you're getting income, but if you can't then continue, if goes to custard, as Stephen and I said, then you're a forced seller in that market. Then let's just say you've leveraged up a little. If you get to 80%, like it's probably not as much risk in commercial, but let's just say worst case scenario, really like the values, you can't sell it for what you need to. And you just like, what happens then? Do you then do you sort of have to try and hold it out somehow? Like, I don't know. That's the kind of, so it's worst case, it's apocalyptic. So probably not a major scenario, but just something to consider. Rentvesting helps you create financial freedom. I'm interested in your thoughts on this one, because how doesn't it not, PK? Like, if you think that, why shouldn't you be buying property?
Well, before we go into that, PK, can you explain what rentvesting is? Just give a high level overview for people that don't know what rentvesting is, and that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll try my best. So I think rentvesting is, I did it myself. So it's like when you rent for a period of time, simultaneously using your savings to buy investment properties. So you could have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 investment properties whilst at the same time renting. So it's like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just buy your own home if you've got all that cash, right? The whole theory behind rentvesting is that in that way, you only have good debt. You only have deductible debt. And deductible debt is generally better for your borrowing capacity than bad debt. In other words, non-deductible debt. Your borrowing capacity is stretched by having investment properties as opposed to your PPOR. So that's kind of the theory behind it. And a lot of people who, like let's say in Sydney or Melbourne, and they're like, I want to buy something for 1.5 million. And right now I don't have as much as that to be able to get it. Instead, I'm going to put my funds to use. I'm going to use my money, put it to work, and that way in the future I can get a passive income and a PPR that I want to live in. That's what rentvesting is.
And just to tack on to the end of that, it's you live in the lifestyle location that you want to live in by renting there, because you can't afford to buy there. So I live in Cronulla. If I want to live in a house in Cronulla, I need $3 million. So I'm going to instead invest in properties around Australia to build up a portfolio that I can then, I see this all the time. We've got investors that don't care about investing. They just want to buy a house in Sydney. So they have to go out there. They say, I realize with a salary of 100 grand, my wife with 80, if we continue down this trajectory and prices keep going up, we're not going to be able to afford. So we have to build a portfolio. Then I want to sell that portfolio down to be able to afford a house in Sydney. But essentially you rent in a lifestyle location that you'd love to live in, and that allows you to invest the capital that you have in a market that may be growing. Because what are the chances that the best location to be buying in is the one that you're sitting in? Probably pretty low. So that sounds positive though. Like I thought we're looking at why we shouldn't be buying.
Yeah, it was hard to argue against it because like the house that I'm sitting in right now.
Did I mess that up? Should that have been the other way?
Rentvesting at
like
its best is when you live at home. It's the best
good hour
version
on
of
it, colleague.
rentvesting. Absolutely. Sorry, go on, PK.
No, I was just saying that I think rent vesting is becoming more difficult. Let me know what you guys think as well, because I don't have like concrete data to prove this, but rent vesting is becoming more difficult going forward as opposed to the last 5 or 10 years. And I think one reason is that in the last 5 or 10 years, rents. Have you seen that stat where it said like rents have risen by like maybe even 20 to 30% in the
30,
last
I heard
10
that.
years?
Yeah.
Whereas like in the last year and probably for the next 1 or 2 years, they're going to rise
gone
by,
up
I don't know,
20?
like 30, 40%.
Yeah.
So rent vesting works, but if that lifestyle location that you want to live in, Bondi or Manly or whatever it is, like your rent is going that much higher, then there comes a point where it's actually cheaper to buy than to rent, in which case
Mm.
rent vesting, like the math,
Ooh,
and everyone should actually do the math, it doesn't add up anymore. There's a threshold, if rents are X, rent vesting works for the next 5 years, 10 years. If rents are X plus Y, like the arithmetic just doesn't add up anymore. And I think we're getting to that, not in every location and every situation, but in some instances.
So I see what you're saying there, PK, because you've gone. What you're saying is because rent has become that much more expensive, therefore you're not. So you're essentially you're not creating spare capacity for you to invest, and therefore so you're not really doing any of either. You're not rents have risen 60% in Hobart in the last 5 years.
This is a good
Hobart.
one. Sorry, I clicked that for you guys. But it's like if you were rent vesting in Hobart and you're like, oh, I can't buy in Hobart 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and you started buying in other places. Yeah, you'd be kicking yourself. Like you would have rather just bought your PPR in Hobart 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, Hobart's a bit interesting one though. It's might be a little, it might be tough to rent Hobart now. But yeah, so I see what you're saying, and obviously in the more expensive, like the $1 million properties, $1 million suburbs plus, your rent is probably going to be still a lot cheaper in the Cronulla, in Joe's example, or even some sort of
but you can't afford to buy in Cronulla, so you haven't got a choice. You have to go further afield. You have to go out into Western Sydney. This is what people did as well, and I think it actually owns true to what people used to do. People used to go and live in Sydney with their parents, and they'd have this amazing home, but to afford, they'd go and get their white picket fence property, and they would have to go out really far west. But it disconnected the family because they're so far out west. They're like, actually, I really want to be close to mum and dad, but I've got this massive house and this massive mortgage. So like there are definitely downs. Like one of the things is first home buyers grant. So I think it's worthwhile mentioning, if you are a first home buyer, if you are an investor and so I did this, I invested in my first property as an investment property. I gave up any future opportunity to be able to use a first home buyer's grant. So you do also have to factor in all cases, unless
nationwide though.
Oh, I don't know. In New South Wales, at least. Good point. Yeah, check with your local whatever, local state. I don't know where my point was going with that, but you do sacrifice that. But for me, there was more money to be made outside of that, rather than living in Western Sydney, disconnected from everyone. I want to live where I want to live, and I want to invest where I want to invest.
Yeah.
So
didn't they have Zoom back in the day, did Joe? But no, what I think what you might have been saying, Joe, was were you going to throw a tip out there from Maxi Phelps about using the trust? Is that what you're about to say?
Yeah, have a chat with Max Phelps about trusts and retaining your.
Speak to your accountant and then your broker, but
yeah,
and because there are potentially ways to keep your first home buying opportunity by buying your first property in a trust and then buying the real PPOR in your name. But that is not financial advice. You need to speak to your accountant. You need to speak to your financial planner. But Max Phelps knows all about it, so have a chat with him.
I think that people should only be rent vesting if they like just flat out can't afford to buy where they want to live, right? If they're just on the edge, if they can afford it, but they'd ideally want their dream home, like you just got to sacrifice a little bit. But if they can afford to buy where they live and that's where they want to live, I think just buy your PPOR and slowly pay that down. This is not what most like investment companies will tell you because they want people to buy investment properties, but that's honestly my opinion. But if you can't afford it, like most people
You
can't.
don't quite know the break-even point. I think you said. I just thought I'd throw
No,
that.
he didn't know that. He didn't know the break-even point.
Yeah, it depends on the suburb and the income and borrowing capacity. Like it's a personalized thing, right?
Now, this is a question for you, Jeff. If I have a $500,000 PPOR or I have a $5,000 investment property, which is going to hamper my borrowing capacity more? Owning the PPOR. So principal place of residence, right? So that's the negative side of doing what you're talking about, PK. I live in Western Sydney. My family's in Western Sydney. I love Western Sydney. I can buy a house for $500,000 here, but it's still owning that principal place of residence hampers your borrowing ability because you're not able to borrow as much money because one, you're getting rental income from your property, and you are not paying rent on your principal place of residence.
That assumes, Joe, that you're not renting in an area where it's so it all comes back to PK's argument. If you can go and rent, that's pretty cheap. Or if you where you want to rent's like $800 a week, and you can buy in an area that's cost so it's kind of
But cool. Rentvesting is still good. I just think it works less well.
It used to work fantastic back in the day.
What it used to. Like no one wants to get a PPO and then be stuck in a prison job on a 30-year mortgage. Like that's what people want to avoid. That's why they do rentvesting. But you got to model it out. Like you got to actually see if the math stacks up before you just go with some flashy strategy.
Yep. Love it. Next one. What is the next reason why you should not invest?
Paying off your mortgage in 7 to 10 years is easy. So if you think this, I think maybe you need to rethink buying a property now and take a step back and just think about it and maybe hear some of the stuff PK is about to say now.
Yeah.
Is it easy?
So like coming back to the guy on the golf course, this is where I get this stimulus from.
But it's a lot of, I see it out there. There's many companies saying this. It's not purely one company.
Sure. No, 100. And I'm actually like guilty. I've got a YouTube video on this exact point as well. But
so you're saying you can do it?
Well, I was teaching how to do it if it's possible in your situation. But the point is that, let's work through the mechanics. So to pay off your mortgage in 7 to 10 years. So let's say you've got a mortgage, you've got that's $500,000 of debt. All right. You want to try to pay that $500K off. To do that, what you need to find is perhaps 3 properties, maybe 4 properties that will double in value in that 7 to 10 year period, by which you can, in that time frame or after that time frame, sell them and then use that cash, that profit, you could say, after tax to pay off your principal place of residence. Like the theory, like what I've just said, it probably entices people and be like, yeah, I can do that. Like that's entirely possible. And probably a lot of listeners have actually done it.
You're going to pay though, PK. What about the tax? Like how much capital gains? Like how much are you just throwing down the... Oh, not throwing.
Well, that's the thing. Like there's a few things that make it hard and make this kind of sentence a little bit clickbaity, and I'm guilty of it as well. The first thing is exactly what you've said, that you'll be paying capital gains tax. Of course, you get the 50% discount, and it depends which structure and etc. that you buy in. But yeah, it's not quite as simple as that. You're paying tax when you sell the property. The other thing is that, Joe, you asked Jeff this exact question: which hurts your borrowing capacity more, PPOR or an investment property? You've already got a PPOR debt in this example. You've already got non-deductible bad debt. So your ability, and I'm just talking for the average person, I'm not talking about the person who makes like $300K a year. The average person who makes like under $100K a year, maybe household income 150, like they've got $500,000 of bad debt on their PPR. They can't even borrow enough to get those 3 to 4 investment properties by which they will double in 7 to 10 years time. They'll sell a couple to pay the $500K PPR debt off. Like the borrowing capacity is what limits this strategy. But on a piece of paper, it's very simple, right? By 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's one thing. That's the second thing. The third thing that makes this a little bit of a spooky statement is that the ability to create a deposit to actually buy 4 investment properties or 3 investment properties to be able to execute that 10-year strategy, like that's a struggle. Interest rates are rising. I honestly don't think interest rates will rise much more than what they have at the moment, maybe 1 or 2 more rate rises, but notwithstanding that, they're higher than what they were before. And so how are people going to not only pay principal and interest, or even interest only on their PPOR, simultaneously have these 4 investment properties, that are, yes, you can buy neutrally geared properties, but you need 20% deposit for that in this day and age. How are people going to come up with, let's say $60,000, $70,000 deposit every single time in the next 1 or 2 years? Because remember that the strategy is based on holding the properties for them to double in 7 to 10 years. That means you need to buy them ASAP. Like, you can't spread the acquisition over 5 or 7 years. You need to buy them like in the first year, the second year, for them to be able to double in 7 to 10 years. So, like you're talking 60, 70,000 times 4, for a deposit, like that $160,000, $200,000 deposit. Like, if you had that, then you just use that to pay half your principal place debt off anyway. Right. So, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like 1, 2, 3, those 3 like really make it difficult in this. I'm not saying it's impossible, and individual circumstances will allow it. I just think it's not something that people should say, I saw an ad, I saw someone do it 2 years ago, therefore I'm putting all my eggs in this strategy.
Yeah. And I think to be able to do it, you really have to be running an active strategy. There's no passivity in being able to do this. You need to be running, if you want to make it do it via property, you need to be doing subdivisions, renovations, developments, doing active stuff that is growing value, and then selling and then refinancing to be able to then move your money and pay down. Like, there's no easy win for this game, unfortunately. We're sounding pretty negative on property this session. It sounds like we don't want people to buy.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna put a title that says why you shouldn't buy real estate right now, you probably should actually talk a little bit about not buying property right now.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff? Have you got any points on this?
That was the intention of the session, right? To like talk about the negatives. Why not?
I was actually skeptical we could pull it off. I thought we'd actually kind of just end up saying, no, you can easily pay it off in 17 years, mate. Just buy a lot of property, like easy days. It's gonna. My thoughts on this are, you definitely have to look under the hood and sort of look at the assumptions that. And I love that people are having conversations and discussing it in the comments. Like, hopefully people are learning, and it looks like it's all pretty much mostly respectful. So I love that. But paying it off, I suppose, is aspirational. So there is and this is why it can be so effective, because in my mind, I'm like, I can be part of that exclusive club that helps me. So I'm like, everybody loves a goal and gamification. So it's then when you see that, just understanding, well, mapping it out and modeling it for yourself and what it would take you specifically, rather than just believing the glossy sales pitch, whoever it comes from.
Yeah, I love it. Do not believe the bull crap. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's my new quote of this week. We have one last statement. We have one last statement for the reason why you shouldn't be doing it. But
how crazy is this? Over 320 people watching. Like, this is absolutely blowing our viewership record. So it's
there
insane.
We go.
We had the go of having everything done for you.
Joe, do you want to do this one?
You nailed that pitch. The statement is having everything done for you, which is one of these one-stop shop property people, right? Where you got a financial planner who then says, hey, you need to speak to our mortgage broker and our accountant, and then they're going to connect you with a buyer's agent who's going to connect you with a developer or builder who's then going to buy absolutely everything for you. So that is a reason why you should not be buying property. Why is that?
Well, can I humbly request that you give us your answer first, Joe? Because to me, it sounds like, to play the devil's advocate, it sounds like really convenient, like, right? Like, if I'm a newbie and I'm like, well, this company just takes care of everything, and they know each other, so they kind of know each other's strategies, and they will talk well with each other. I don't need to link people up. It sounds good.
It's a great. It sounds really good, but the challenge that we have with these type of situations and these larger companies is the incentive to be able to do a good job. So I buy property, right? I run a buyer's agency. I only work with people, and I do not take a referral, a kickback, or anything. Every time, because I need to do this, right? I need an accountant. I need a mortgage broker. I need a property manager, conveyancer, all of these things. But if my incentive is I've got two conveyancers, one that pays me $500 and one that doesn't pay me anything at all. Number two that doesn't pay me anything at all is absolutely the best. But number one pays me $500. Who am I incentivized as a business to apply you to? I'm going to give you to the person that is $500 that is not necessarily the best fit for you. And that's kind of what happens in these type of businesses. When you break apart different businesses where you've got an expert conveyancer, they are the best at conveyancing. But when you smash them all together, it is someone that's not really that is a conveyancer, but they're not the owner. They're just someone that is a conveyancer. They get paid a salary. Sure, they make a couple of commissions, but they're not really hardcore going after your best interests. So for me, I want to know where the incentives lie, and I want to know who is getting paid, what the kickbacks are, and how that kind of works. Typically as well, the larger firms are all interconnected, paying each other kickbacks, but they're generally giving you a crappier product. There's not any company that I know that has over 50 employees that is giving customers good investment opportunities out there that I've seen. I don't go out there looking in the market searching for these, so I don't know if
that's a big call, Joe. That's a huge call, man. It is a big statement. It's not. Yeah. It's probably not fair for a number of them, but for me, 50 is very hard, and they're all interconnected, and they're all making money and crossing. So that's kind of where's the incentive. And yeah, this is Brian's come up with another cracking again. Follow the money. Yeah. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I think it's less about the size of the company, and yes, the size can be an indication. It's more about, well, how do they actually work? If it is very seamless and for passing from one handball, because I'm sure you could have I don't know, maybe there's probably companies of 50 plus that, yeah. Sorry, I'm going to,
there will be
picking on that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think it's because the beauty with this, particularly with people in one or two, because buying a property can be painful, like administratively, like going to your broker and then going to your accountant. You have to then sort of make multiple phone calls, and you have to explain, and you have to get them to talk to each other. So you have to be sort of, and sometimes you have to be pushy because there's occasionally urgency to buy the property. So you sort of have to sometimes say to somebody, look, I need this done by a couple of days' time. Can we make this work? Let's get these people in the room. So whereas when you're going to a company that does it all together, you don't have that friction. It's rather simple and easy. It all kind of runs without you having to do too much. So it's the simple but not necessarily the best or most effective option. For some of the reasons Joe's mentioned. Off to you, PK.
No, that was my thoughts as well. And you almost want like different parts of your team to work against each other in the sense of like,
that's a great
let's
point.
say your property manager, they should be calling out that, oh, this property actually, it's got some housing commission, a couple of streets away, or, the particular type of layout of the property is not really suited to the demographic of the tenants here. Whereas if you're the person that's buying that property for you, whichever company that is, they have a in-house property manager, or if they're getting kickbacks from the property manager, like their property manager is not going to say any of that stuff that creates friction. Same with your solicitor or conveyancer. Like they should be saying that, actually, yes, post-building and pest inspection, you can get XYZ more off. And, we think this is how much you can negotiate, and we'll interact and we'll liaise with the vendor's conveyancer or solicitor. But if, the conveyancing team or legal team is in the same kind of umbrella as the buyer's agent or whatever company, right? They're not really incentivized to like really go hard at these sticky points. There's always exceptions, and these are just generalizations, right? There's always I'm sure good companies where everyone's sort of in the same umbrella as well. But in my experience, and it sounds like from you guys as well, it's probably something to double check, triple check.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting one. Don't they have to disclose? I mean, they do. I mean, legally, I believe this has to be disclosed, don't they?
No, they don't. They don't. No, not
Don't
so. Yeah. Different kickbacks for different professionals. Solicitors, mortgage brokers have to declare kickbacks. Buyers agents, real estate agents don't, unless it's directly related to the exchange of that property. So,
regardless of whether they would need to or not, it's where are they actually declaring that? Because if they put it on page 35 right down the bottom in size 8 font, do you know that it's actually there?
I just posted a little comment up there, so it just went to PK's. It went to the Facebook group, not all of it. But these are was it 17 questions to ask a buyer's agent to find out if they're a spruiker or not. And I think that's super valuable to have a check through some of those comments and questions, because the key ones are what kind of kickbacks are you getting from brokers or other professionals? What type of properties do you go about purchasing? And bring up, what are your thoughts of house and land packages? That's another great one to ask. How does that investment strategy work in? Because the person regardless of any team member, each team member needs to be doing their own component, but they also need to be on the same kind of path. Because if you've got a conveyancer and a mortgage broker and it's all under one banner for house and land packages are the best, all of those team members are going to say house and land packages are the best. So you need to find team members that are aligning your strategy. And if that's your strategy, house and land, then please don't do it. But if you do, then great. Maybe an all-in-one company is perfect for you.
Joe, there's a little bit of friction in the comments. The guy with the moustache, I assume that's Joe because I can't grow a moustache.
The guy with the moustache.
It's a little out of line, accusing the professionals like financial planners, accountants, conveyancers, and brokers are not working the best interest duty for their clients. Well, I mean,
I just go where the incentive is. That's it. Go where the incentive is. And actually, also, if you are a financial planner and an accountant, you are not a property expert. You don't know what is the best property to go and buy. So if you go to an accountant, and this is the thing with accountants, you go to an accountant, what should I buy? Depreciation, negative gearing. That's what you should go out and get. Is that the best investment strategy for you? No, you need to speak to a property strategist that's thinking about property, not just tax and depreciation. So,
to speak to some of this, I mean, there's best interest, which is they reformed this in 2013, the future of FOFA, future of financial advice. So I think it was 2013. But post FOFA, there needed to be a higher standard. Financial planners were held to a higher thing. But what Joe's hit on there, and it can come across like that from Joe. I think it shows that you're passionate about it. And I wanted to bring this up. I didn't want to just sort of play all the softball questions, but I think acting in the best interest versus actually what is the best they're probably two slightly different things. You can provide based on your knowledge and expertise what the best based on your sort of wheelhouse. That may not necessarily be the best based on because they might have the experience. So you can not fall a cropper of the legislation, but then is that going to give the optimum outcome for the customer?
And to Joe's point earlier, like they may not be doing it like maliciously. It might just be that they're so big, like they have to get through 10 clients a week or 50 clients a month or whatever, and they're just like they don't have time. So they're just like they do the bare minimum just to get the deal done. And that's just because they're just an employee. They're just doing their job. They don't really care, right? That's just human behavior. If you get too big and you have too many clients, and you just got to get through them.
Here we go.
Yeah, churn and burn is what they call that.
Hope you didn't mind me doing that to you, Joe.
No. I mean, it's a fair call because people aren't. And the thing is, my auntie, right? She is lovely person, amazing lady. But she was selling house and land packages to people. And I was like, that's amazing. You're helping these first home buyers. So there is a market for it. I have a friend, he bought in that kind of Schofield area you're talking about, PK. He loves it. The best thing ever. And it's even grown in value for him. And so she sold to people and it's amazing. So that's great. But for an investment perspective, no, it's not great.
This is a fairly good question as well. Tell me about your property portfolio and your results. I think you can be a good accountant without necessarily you guys might disagree with me on this. So I think you can be a fairly good accountant, a property accountant, without actually having a sizable portfolio yourself. Of course, it's great, but I think as long as you deal with the type of clients who are actually achieving the results. So if somebody's got 15 clients with 10 plus property portfolios, then they probably know a thing or two about accounting for those kind of people. Whereas if you've got
fantastic. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we just achieved 7 reasons why you should not be buying property. Number 1 is house and land packages. Retiring in 10 years, you should always buy property. Rentvesting, pay your mortgage off in 7 years, and having everything done all for you in one space.
Did you say rentvesting? You do rentvesting?
Yeah.
I should have just bought them up.
So this has been an absolutely amazing episode. It's really highlighted some of the reasons why. Actually, someone wrote this pretty well just up here. I think it was Brian again. It's why it's crucial to get as much education as possible, because you need to understand the nuance in property. Because if you don't understand it, don't get it, it's not going to help you. So let's go to some of the questions.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. I was just going to say, like, to add to that, get as much education as possible from a variety of sources, because otherwise you might be really entrenched in one person's line of thought and be like, I know so much, but it's actually completely wrong. And they've just been like, mugging you the whole time to continue that metaphor. Do you guys agree on that? I mean, there's
a fantastic book.
Overwhelm, but do you agree with that?
What about mugging?
It's a fantastic book that's been written out there by one of these kind of spruiker big companies. And I love the book, but then you fall into their funnel and all of a sudden you've got a terrible platform here. But they tell you all these amazing investment strategies. It gets you set up and going. So yeah, absolutely. It's only until you start reading all the other books and other resources where you can start to create your own theory. And I'm not, like what you're saying, PK, is don't listen to PK. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Jeff. Form your own opinions around what is valuable. Maybe you turn out to be house and land packages is the best thing for you.
The king of house and land pack, or queen. This is an interesting one that we were just kind of talking about. I think the answer is no, but is that true, PK? You don't need a license to that, do you?
I don't know what a property strategist
is. It's like somebody who prepares, like, I don't know, like a company who has a big podcast. They have a property strategy kind of thing. And they, I don't think you need to be, because it's not regulated, right?
And this is, maybe it will surprise people, but the property industry is like not regulated at all. Like when I first started my business, I really wanted to do things by the book, and I got some legal advice on that. And you pay $5,000 for like a lot of legal advice, but like the sum and substance of it was like, anyone can create a course, anyone can become a property strategist, anyone can become a buyer's agent as well. Of course, there's some, certifications and licenses you need, but it's not really a huge barrier to entry. There's not huge hurdles out there. And that's it's like, even me, I have 0 qualifications in anything that I've just said right now. So, yes, I've got a Bachelor of Commerce. Yes, I've done econometrics. Yes, I have a large property portfolio. Yes, I've helped thousands of people. But there is no qualification that I can do to become qualified. It just doesn't exist. If there was one, I'd do it, right? And like a lot of people would do it, but there just isn't one.
There is that industry. They're trying to create one, that QPIA one. But I'm not going to say that's good or bad. I just think they're trying to put something out there, but maybe somebody else might be comfortable saying it's good or bad. I like this. I love that he puts Melbourne in it as well. He's like, PK picking on Melbourne. I'm going to have to stick up for Melbourne. Good location, good price, good yield, good emergency fund. Is it much more complicated than that, PK? There's probably a whole bunch of data
good
points.
Location, Melbourne. Oh yeah, just go for it.
Good.
The yields in Melbourne are a little bit better than Sydney on aggregate, but they're the second worst.
So I think what he's saying is that, like, that's all you really need in property. Like, beyond, of course, there's data points, but I think sometimes it can be a bit overcomplicated. So he's not asking if Melbourne is good for that, but
Yeah, he's saying good location, good price, good yield, good emergency fund. Yeah, there's got to be a little bit more to it than that. But if you get a good location, yeah, absolutely. And a good price. That's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to find a good location at the best price. That is it. Well, there's been a number of fantastic comments that have been thrown throughout this. Let's jump into some of those. And if anyone does have any questions for PK or Joe or Jeff, throw those at us now, and we'll get to as many as we can over the next couple of minutes.
Can we? This is. I mean, some of this might your IP. So maybe give us one or two, or how many ever you feel comfortable with.
So the question is, what all paid and unpaid sources of data you rely on, PK? Any websites which you may show us? Thanks, guys.
Sure. I mean, one really good one is the ABS website, and the ABS website has a lot of garbage from a location selection perspective on it, but there's some really cool things. Like one data point that I look at, my clients look at as well, is the trajectory of incomes, not the absolute level of incomes, but how they're tracking versus the city or state average. And so if you can see how your suburb is performing over the course of multiple years, of course, ABS is long-term data, then you can ascertain whether that area is gentrifying or not, whether Kias are turning into Audis turning into whatever the next thing up is. That's a good long-term data point. That doesn't mean that your area is going to go up in the next year, but that's a good one data point in formulating an opinion on whether in the long term that area is gentrifying or not. That's completely free. Everyone always asks, what is the best data that you can get to make a cohesive judgment call and where to buy? In my experience, I'll tell you honestly, the best data is not CoreLogic subscriptions, but the CoreLogic underlying data dumps. You can get I think it's a 15K package that gives you a time series. I think it's 10 or 15 years of time series on lots of data points like stock on market, inventory levels, days on market, etc., etc. And you can pay more. I think $30,000 for 30-year time series. And so it's expensive, but to answer the question, like that is the best data source. And you have to, that's not something that's retail. You have to email them or call them. But if you can get your hands on that, and for those of you who are like a little bit, data savvy, know how to cleanse a CSV file, etc., you can cleanse that, create a pivot table or a power pivot, and like that is literally more powerful than anything out there. That's where like really, really, really good buyers agents, they have that, and they know what's up. They're not relying on, your $150 a month kind of data websites and this sort of thing. Those are all good, but the underlying relationships within capital growth and underlying factors, you need to assess that based on regressions over a 30-year period. So for anyone who's like a real data nut, like me, go get that. Otherwise, I mean, we can share in the comments later, like maybe 10 to 15 different websites that people can go to.
Yeah, definitely should do that.
Great point.
You want to pick a question, Joe? I got 10 stars.
I'm just going to click randomly this one. Oh, actually, on the data.
I don't know what your thoughts on beanies. I'm sort of doing this ad lib, so I hope you don't think it's terrible. But I think Andrew Bean's putting together something on this commercial property data. I think his is quite manual, so I don't know how long it's going to take him to do all that, but it sounds pretty cool. But do you have any PK that you don't really?
For me, sorry, I thought that was to Joe. No, like I was saying before, this is the question I had myself, right? And I'm still learning commercial, so I don't profess to like know everything about commercial. But I've been trying to get my hands on like a decent set of data whereby I can take my opinion out and just see, how has industrial versus retail versus office in different cities, states, submarkets performed with different employment, unemployment trends, different interest rate, cash rate trends over time. I haven't been able to find that data. So like, honestly, I don't have a good answer. I think Andrew Bean has done a great job. I haven't been able to use his to actually make cohesive decisions in commercial myself, but it's still better than probably most other things that's out there. But I think in commercial, like, it is kind of unique, right? You literally do have to make phone calls, like dozens of phone calls to property managers, to agents in the location that you've selected, to really understand what's going on, really understand true valuations. You can't just get a couple of comparables and say, this is what the rent should be, this is what the square meter rate is. You need to really understand this stuff by like literally hours and hours and hours on the phone. And it's a bit like property development, I think. Like, I don't know what you guys think, but in property development, you can't look at all 15,000 suburbs across Australia. You have to isolate to maybe two
One
or
or
three
two, or a
areas.
couple around the place, because
Exactly.
you can't compare across the what kind of development's happening in even sort of across town. I mean, it's similar anyway. Thanks for answering that question, Brian, from Stuart, about property strategists and if they're worth a couple of grand. Maybe not. Let's see. YouTube user has said, is a bad property in a good suburb better than a good property in a bad suburb? That's an interesting.
That's a great question.
It's like a kind of back to forth. Like, what do you, PK? You want to answer this first, or you want to go last on this one?
Oh, I'll go last. Joe or Jeff, either of you could go ahead.
I love this one. A bad property in a good suburb is by far the better way to go. Definitely go that route. Do not get a good property in a terrible location, because location does 80% of the heavy lifting. Go to a location. Like, if you can get a terrible, like if all you can afford is the worst property on the best street, then go for that. If you can afford like a slightly better one, I would say probably go the slightly better one. But it really depends on how active you want to be. If this place is falling down and you need to spend $100,000 on a renovation, maybe skip it. But if you can spend $20,000, and then that's going to grow the value by $60,000, you're putting in $1 and you're getting back $3. So it's totally worthwhile. But if you buy in a bad suburb, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Do buy the worst property on the best street rather than the best property on the worst street.
I think before we throw across to PK, I'll echo largely your thoughts. So originally, I was like, what happens if it really comes down to your budget as well, because if you're looking at a bad property in a good suburb, if the good suburb is Mossman, for example, a bad property there is still going to cost you, like, let's just say maybe it's a unit. You're still spending $800,000 or $900,000, maybe a bit more for a unit. And then if that underperforms that area, maybe then are you going to get pulled up? So you're not buying Mossman, you're buying that particular property in that suburb. So I think it's a very it's a complex question. It's a very good one, and it's an important one as well. So I think buying a slightly below average in a good suburb is better, but buying a bad or the worst is maybe a little too simple. Thoughts, PK?
Yeah, no, I have the same. It's like Adelaide has boomed. People who may not be educated or just started to think about property, they're like, oh, Adelaide, like, that's the place to buy. And then they're like, oh, damn, I can't find anything under 400. And then like, hang on, like, Elizabeth, like Elizabeth, I can still find. They're like, oh, cool, capital city under 400, Elizabeth. But it's like, maybe famous last words, but there are more premium, nicer areas in a place like Mount Gambier, although that's regional, that I would put my money under 400 as opposed to Elizabeth. So it just comes down to like exactly what you guys said.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got interesting. This is
like this one. Yeah, I really like this question, and obviously it's directed at you, PK, but we can all go around it. I bought a property 6 months ago. Price is still the same since. I have a weird feeling it may have 50K less now. Should I sell it, or when should I sell it? So essentially, you bought a property and you paid either too much for it, or you bought it in a location that's in a dying market. What do you guys think of this one?
That's kind of like hard to believe, like for me. It's obviously true, but like Perth has done so well, in the last 6 months. I don't know where, maybe you can share the suburb and we can give some insights on it. But
this came up a while ago, so they might not still be watching.
And what's the unit? Like, was it a unit? Was it a house? How did that kind of, because if it was a unit in Perth, I could probably 6 months probably believe that it's dropped that amount, especially if you've overpaid You've overpaid for it. Like, it's easy to overpay on stuff. Like, it's amazing.
Particularly when you think everything is going up, you sort of say you go in and I think it's a tough one, because I don't like to say to people either they should buy or sell, particularly given that I think it's like my kind of approach generally, because I've sold property that I didn't think was going to perform over the longer term. It was the first property I bought, and I've sold others in my time as well, but that was for specific reasons. But the reason I sold that property, which is in the northern suburbs of Queensland, it's because it wasn't the type of property that I felt. It was a townhouse. So I didn't think it was going to perform, and I wasn't anywhere near as educated as what I needed to be to buy that. So I think you need to go back, you need to go back to the original reason you bought the property, and what the fundamentals, like what was your thesis, what was the data, what was the property manager saying to you, what were all these things, and you haven't done those, and maybe try and do those now and just reverse engineer what it looks like now. Like, it's too late to maybe do, and then make a call if it's stopping you progressing forward, then maybe, but you got to make your own calls. Like, I'm not saying sell it, but I think you just have to make those, do some hard thinking, potentially. Pick it.
Yeah. I generally think that, with like transaction costs in Australia, the way they are, and buying and selling,
higher interest rates as well, maybe hard to buy something else. So what are you replacing it with?
Exactly, like last resort. Like when you run out of borrowing capacity and you're like, oh, I want to continue my journey, maybe that's the time to sell it, but assess it on the data at that point.
Yeah, at 6 months, it's very hard to tell the growth as well.
Like it kind of plays to one of our myths, or one of our kind of things. It's about being financially free in 10 years. Like, a lot of things have to go right. And if you're looking at it every 3 days on like a stock or something, or crypto, and saying, oh, it hasn't gone up 220%, like, it's a failure. It's not successful.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, would I buy this property today? And also, what can I do? I'm going to sell this property. I'm going to lose, maybe $50,000 of entry costs and exit costs. Am I better off with a $400,000 nest egg instead of a $500,000 invested here? So what is going to be the best? Because, Joe is the king of Adelaide.
No, I don't think it's.
Well, I'll take that. That. I do like Adelaide. Some good opportunities.
I love how Jeff just sneaks in these these sometimes snarky, sometimes cute comments.
Like a kid in the candy store, somewhat. This is going to be a big question. What are your thoughts when the RBA finally takes their foot off the gas mid-2023? Will the Big Four increase borrowing capacity, and by how much? Well, we've already seen. You already saw NAB, and I think there was another one as well. So you've already seen them find ways to tweak the criteria. So
BOQ, yeah.
I mean, this is kind of speaking to Steve McKnight's point last week. Like, he called it a Ponzi, so he called it a couple of times, and to some extent, I mean, if things like unless they change the borrowing capacity, like they could even sort of say 40-year borrowing terms. Like, it starts throwing that out there, that then throws out, or even 50-year borrowing terms or loan terms. Then that way you can sort of start to say, well, yes, your borrowing capacity does increase because you're changing the dynamics. What are your thoughts when the RBA finally takes? I mean, I think that might be too late if you're trying to time the market. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been wrong, and like there's YouTube videos of me 6 months ago saying that interest rates are unlikely to go up more than 1 or 2%. So,
me too.
I don't know. If
I stopped making them. I'm just like, I really don't know if anybody thinks. I look at the RBA, what their yield, or the ASX one, and that kind of show some indication.
Like the data, like honestly, it seems like every 2 weeks, you go from being bearish to like bullish on interest rates. Things that like right now, inflation just came down, like Joe said before. Retail spending has come down, so it seems that it would be preposterous for the RBA to go at a 50% rate hike in December. If they only do 25%, then there's no January meeting. It's like that might be it. CBA reckons there's only 1 or 2 left. It's hard to tell, but I definitely think we're closer to the peak than not. And in terms of Big Four increasing borrowing capacity, net interest margins for banks, the way that overseas lending and global money markets are working, net interest margin, which is how banks make money, is just going down and down and down and down. So they need to compete with each other. They need to vie for business. I don't know, how they're going to do it. I'm not a banker or anything like that. But one thing, I'll be keen to get your guys' thoughts on this, and it probably affects everyone. Like the buffer, the APRA put on banks, that increased from 2% to 3%, the buffer that banks have to calculate your serviceability on, your real lending rate plus 3% that got increased last year by 1%. I reckon that could go back down to 2%. Because now interest rates are almost at the top. There's no need to have huge buffers. That could mean that all of a sudden people that, I don't know, I'm just making this up, that couldn't borrow 200K can now borrow 300K. People who could borrow 500K can now borrow I don't know the exact arithmetic, but do you guys think that's going to happen?
I think it's once they get, because I don't necessarily know if APRA and the RBA work in conjunction. I think maybe they do. They probably do talk to each other. They probably have coffees together but I don't know if there's any official collaboration between those two organizations. But they sort of have two slightly different mandates. Like APRA is just to make sure there's stability in the banking kind of system. So I think once APRA, which is Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, is confident that they're getting closer to the end, because the last thing they'd want to do is sort of act too preemptly. Because imagine if they did that when the cash rate was 2%, and next minute now the cash rate's sort of close, almost free, and now people who have borrowed at 2% RBA cash rate, they now only got a buffer of 1% on top of whatever they borrowed. So I think eventually there'll be scope for that, but who knows when and by how much?
Yeah.
I don't.
And also, the RBA, they're all just going to rely on what the RBA has to say. And the RBA's data is very far behind. So we're only probably in just June, July numbers, that all of the data that the RBA has to make all of their decisions. So we're going to have to wait until January, February time to when we start to catch up to kind of where kind of makes sense. So no one's going to pull any crazy triggers right now, except for the RBA. Once they do whatever they're going to do, once they see inflation is starting to push back down, then they loosen up and things will start to shift. But I don't see anything too crazy. Nothing crazy is going to happen anytime soon.
I'm picking on a lot of the macro sort of questions because people are asking talk about the Canberra market. There was something about talking about Toowoomba. I'd love to sort of we'd be literally here for 5 hours, and you're an hour behind in Queensland, I believe. PK?
Yeah, I'm still relatively early, 8:30.
Yeah, but
still
I've
awake.
got. Let's kind of. This is an interesting one here. What's up with a negative gearing thingy being removed? They say it will help prices come down. How does that work?
So the way I like to think about it is the property market is just like any market. Why did property prices go up? Because in COVID was businesses shutting down, everything was shutting down, all the money is going, everything is going to go down. Everyone was saying properties are going to crash. But then the government printed billions of dollars and tipped that money into people, and those people then put that money into assets like crypto, shares, property, and all of those assets rose. And this is the exact same thing here with negative gearing. A lot of people utilize negative gearing to lower their tax threshold. So for me, if it's removed, it's going to remove a lot of value from the market. So if the government does remove it from people, that is going to push prices down. That's how I see the world.
Assuming demand will probably go down because investors will probably pull out.
Well, investors will, because if you have the benefit of negatively gearing is a tax write-off and getting money back from the government. And if that doesn't exist, you're just losing money for the sake of losing money. It's very much offset by a tax write-off. And all of the people that are negatively gearing are just going to say, hell no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to pull all my money out and put it into a different asset class. So if that happens, I think buy some Australian shares. That's
a good point, right? Like negative gearing isn't specific to property. It's a tax philosophy across all asset classes. So it's very politically easy to say, remove negative gearing on property, but then remove it on stocks as well, right? Do it on everything, like even playing field. I'll probably get some haters after that, but there should be some
I imagine I'm sure they would actually, surely.
Then there would be a flight of liquidity of funds from Australia back to their origins, Hong Kong, the US, London, and that would destroy the ability of Australian companies to raise capital, to issue more debt. That would contract the Australian economy. Like, it's political suicide.
Yeah, this is you could just do a whole session on this question, and I think they've tried to do it. Well, they did do it in, I think it was the late 80s or early 80s. Was it the Hawke government? I wasn't born then, so sorry
Didn't
for
last
that.
long.
Yeah, it lasted about probably 6 or 12 months roughly, and they said, "Oh, look, we're really disincentivizing investors here. We probably need to, we need people to buy houses and sort of provide accommodation because we're not doing it ourselves." So, and then
Providing accommodation and stamp duty, massive. Like the government gets a boatload
well,
of
that's a
money.
state government, so negative gearing is a federal. So it's kind of But
They'll probably have a crack at it again, maybe, I don't know, in a couple of elections from now. If we
waiting
ever
for
win
Liberal
the
to go
next
with that kind of
election.
policy, that would be just throw the real cat amongst the pigeons, like Liberal to go with a non-Liberal policy. Not that I'm trying to be as apolitical as possible. For this one, which is better, BA or DIY? I'm just going to put a podcast here because otherwise this is like a round 2 of the debate. I'm going to drop a comment.
Drop a comment in here.
Yeah, listen
which
to
is better. Okay, PK, you go why going for a buyer's agent is better, and I'll go with why education.
Do you really want to do this, Joe? Do you really want to do
I don't want to.
No, it's in reverse. We're doing reverse. You're saying why buyer's agents are better.
It's not
all I'll say on this, because it's like I'm kind of sick of talking about it, to be honest, but I know, Joe, you are. All I'll say is go check out that video and try to find someone like Joe if you are considering a buyer's agent, because my honest opinion, I know everyone thinks I hate buyer's agents. My honest opinion is that the majority, i.e. more than 50% of buyer's agents, aren't worth it. But try to find someone like Joe if it's not Joe.
Have you got data for
if
that?
you are. I have no data on it. I just have like more than 1,000 clients' portfolios to look at.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I think for me is education is a stepping point into a buyer's agent. My first purchase was through a buyer's agent that we were talking about. One-stop shop, awesome guy. He wore a suit. He was on all the podcasts. He was the coolest thing since sliced bread. He bought me a terrible asset, but it was because I didn't have the education behind me to ask the questions that I needed to ask to understand if he was a good buyer's agent or not. So fundamentally, it all starts with education. And you need that first, and then go start to build your team of professionals out from there. So PK, you do education. How can people learn more about if people have loved this session so far, how can people learn more about you? Because
can I ask one more question, Joe, before we go into reference? Oh, okay.
No, go.
I thought we've got it. Yeah, this one I think is really cool because I just want to know this myself. Who inspires you? Do you have mentors?
Actually, there was a question that was very kind of similar to this by Steve Polisi. If you're still watching as well, he was asking the Polisi. He was asking what I'd do different, and it's kind of the same answer as this. Who inspires you? Do you have mentors? Like I don't really have mentors. I never really had formal mentors. I know that's kind of hypocritical because I espouse that you should get education and mentoring. I never really had any formal mentors, but what I would do different is not necessarily paid mentors, let's be honest, but try to find someone that can kind of open your eyes, because what my biggest regret in property, and I don't teach developing or commercial or anything like that, but my biggest regret in property was having a limiting mindset or belief system, and I took too long to start developing. I took too long to start, commercial property. Steve Polisi himself says that you should, most times start with residential, and I agree with that. But I probably took too long to go to the next steps up. And so, what inspires me the most, I think it's like mentors, like you guys didn't pay me to say this, but it's genuinely like mentors like you guys, like Jeff. I don't know how your group works and stuff, but I'm pretty sure you're not like making $1 million. You're out actually trying to help people. Well, maybe you are, right? Like you're just trying to help people. And same with Joe. Like I can tell you, for anyone who's watching or listening, like Joe could make a lot more money pivoting to a type of buyer's agent business model that gets him way more clients, that he could charge far more per pop. He could be making much more than what he's, the type of business he has, but he has integrity. And whether it's buyers agents, whether it's course creators, whether it's just other YouTubers, like there are so many not good YouTubers out there, people who have integrity, and I try to have integrity, like I try my best. Those are the people who inspire me. Even like some of my clients, right? Like they've just got one property, but it's like they worked hard for it, like they're working a 9-to-9 job. They have 2 kids. Like it's really hard. They're making 100K household income, but they like hustle to get that property. Like that's what inspires me. So what I would do different is like surround myself with more those types of people. And I'm very grateful to be on this because you guys are those types of people.
Well said.
Too nice, PK. Like I would say, nice. Who's your mentor, Joe? Who do you see as
No, well, the reason why we created this group, right? This is how this entire group started. Is me and Jeff met at a Steve McKnight conference where we had a whole room. We had 100 people that loved property, talked about property, but then all of us went home. And we were like, oh man, I haven't got any friends. I haven't got any family that care about property. And that's exactly what this what this group is. And it's all just about people coming together, talking about their passion and helping each other grow. There are people in this group like you, PK, that have multi-million-dollar portfolios and that provide, education galore throughout your podcast, your YouTube channels, your course itself. And these people just jump in the comments and share. So my mentors are the people that are your mentors, PK, the people that actually do crazy stuff and work incredibly hard and they get the results. And it's so much sweeter when you see that. Like it's amazing.
It's kind of like, it's weird because like people call me a property guru because like I just took a risk and started producing content, but there are literally like there are probably like, I don't know, like 100,000 more successful property investors than me and probably you guys in Australia, but they just don't produce content, right? It's like those are the real inspiring people. And in these groups, like my group, your group, they are there, like they're there. So people should make the most of that.
We really want to speak to some of those people, but it's just like some people just don't want to get on camera and all that sort of stuff. So I get that. But another underrated, I'm going to say a mentor of mine is Jeremy Mazzelli. Like he's underrated. Like that guy is an absolute powerhouse. Like really appreciate us. Yeah. Was it?
Sorry, I've got a request here for hugs.
Let's do it. Group hug.
Accelerating quickly. And you've got to just surround yourself with good people that are headed in the right direction. I think that's the key message of all of this.
Okay. Should we let's wrap it up.
We've gone through the reasons why you shouldn't be buying property today, and I think there's a lot more reasons why you should be buying property, but we've got to learn about how to make that happen. So what are the resources? What are the tools? How can we learn, PK? How do we do it? Because you have an amazing course teaching thousands of people how to do it. Give us the run through.
Yeah, no, I think before anyone considers the course or anything at all, like I always say this, no one cares about your money as much as you do. Not even me, as much as I profess to be holier than thou. So, get educated and get free educated first. So I have a podcast on Apple and what's it's called? Spotify and Google Podcasts. We actually just hit the 100 review mark, which was pretty cool. A lot of hard work went into that. And also my YouTube channel and the Facebook group. They're all Australian Property Mastery by PK. The Facebook group has not as many as people as you guys, but around 25,000. YouTube is at, it's pretty cool. It's almost at 17K subs now, which I'm pretty happy about.
Amazing.
So yeah, watch that stuff, but get a diversity of education, and then you'll be more convinced. Like even if you do want to do my course, get other free education first, and then you can really see the value of the course. Or you may say, this is actually not for me. I vibe with someone else. I just think that free education is king.